Hi there, this is CS Professor Pam with Jumpstart Code. We are continuing to learn JavaScript and we have started working on decisions, which are if statements. So we're going to continue that right now by building a little number guessing game. So we are going to build something that looks kind of like this, where we're going to we're going to pick a number and ask the user to guess it in a certain number of turns, and we'll tell you whether you're right or wrong. So in order to do this, we always have to start out thinking about a plan. And we first have to think about our user interface, right? Because we'll have to build this user interface. So what are the components that I have here? We always have, a header, which has our headline there. Then I've got some text here, so this text can all be in a paragraph. Then I've got some additional text here. I'll talk in a second about what to use for that. This is going to be an input box, a text box. So this is going to be an input. And then we will need a button so that when we click the button, we can check whether the guess is correct or not. And then you don't see this here, but we're going to need a place to display a message to say either you won or guess again. Now, if I want this text here to display, if I made this text a paragraph, then a paragraph is a block level element, and that means it would want to take up a whole line by itself. If I want this text to go in front of this, I could use a label. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm actually going to use a span element, because remember, a span is an inline element and doesn't take up its own start on a new row. So I'm just going to show you the HTML that I've put together so far. Again, just our standard stuff at the top. I'm not going to worry about CSS and formatting right now. I'm going to focus on functionality. So here is my headline, guess the number. Here's my paragraph text, and I just use breaks to have that text move over to the next line. I'm keeping things very simple right now. I have a span element that says enter the guess. Because it's a span element, then this input will go on the same line next to it because it's an inline element. And a button is also an inline element, so it goes on that same line. Notice that I have given the input an ID because I'm going to have to retrieve the number from that. And I have given the button an ID so that I can attach an event listener to create action when I click that button. And I have this H3 that I'm going to kind of give my message. And so I have an ID for that. And then I have a script here that is attached. Remember our first step. All right, so first of all, let's just look at our page and make sure that this is what we're displaying. So this is what I'm seeing now, right? I'm going to open up my console because I'm getting ready to do JavaScript. And now we're going to attach this JavaScript file. And remember, the first step is always just to verify that you have your file attached. So I'm going to pause for a few seconds here. You should pause the video and make sure that you have your JavaScript file attached. Okay, so in my JavaScript file, I have, again, this use strict is just a good thing to do. Don't worry too much about why right now, but it's going to help us a little bit with our troubleshooting. And I have an alert because I want to make sure that I have actually connected my JavaScript properly. So if I save this and run it, you see over here it tells me connected. So now I can move on, and we don't need that. So now I want to create an event listener for the click event of my button, right? So let's go double check. Remember, what's the ID? My button is called check. That's the ID. So we are going to do document get element by ID. Check is the name of it. We are going to add an event listener. The event that I want to listen for is the click event. And when that happens, I am going to create a function that is going to be called, and I'm going to name that function check guess, right? You should always give your functions meaningful names that give you a clue about what they are going to do. So why don't you pause this video and set up the check guess function and put an alert there to make sure that when you click the button, that is the function that will be connected. Okay, so I have set up my function check guess. It has no parameters. Later on, we're going to learn that sometimes there is something that goes in these parentheses, but for now, this function has no parameters, so empty parentheses. Here's my start and end of this function. And all I want to do right now is make sure that it's connected. So I'm going to put an alert in there. And I'm going to save and go over here and click the button, and I get this alert, right? So now I know everything is set up properly. So let's think about what are the things that we need to do. We need to code with comments in mind. So if we think about a plan, what are the basic steps that we need to do? So first of all, we need to be able to generate this random number between 1 and 100. Once I can do that, then we've got a place where the user can input a number, and when they input and click the button, then we'll want to compare the number that they input to this picked number. So how do we generate a random number? So this is a concept that many programming languages have, is some sort of way to generate a random number. It's called a random number generator. And in JavaScript, the random number generator is a function called math.random. And notice the capital M there. Remember, JavaScript is case sensitive. Okay? So this is I'm in the MDN docs because it's important to be able to read documentation and figure out what you need. So what is this document telling me? It's telling me that math.random returns a floating point pseudo-random number in the range of 0 to less than 1. So it includes 0 but not 1. So it gives me back some sort of random decimal number. Now let's just check that out to understand. So here in the very beginning, remember when we run our JavaScript program, it starts from the top here and it sets up this click event. So one of the next things that I need to do before we actually click the button, we want to generate a random number between 1 and 100. Okay, but before I can figure out how to do that, I need to just generate any random number at all. So I'm going to create a variable. Let's call it picked number. And we're going to use this math.random because I want to see what that is giving me. So let's console log that. So I'm kind of experimenting right now before I actually continue with my code, because if I can't figure out how to generate this random number, I can't do anything else, right? So we have to stop and figure this particular part out. So let's actually save all. And over here, look at what it's telling me. Picked number is, so here's some kind of random number, right? Let's just keep refreshing this page, because every time I refresh this page, it starts all over again with this JavaScript file. So if I refresh the page, look, I'm getting a different number. This one starts 0.84. Let's do it again, 0.67. So you can see we are getting some kind of long, crazy decimal number, but it's always a number from 0. It will never be exactly 1. So it'll be up to 0.999 something. All right. But I want an integer number. I want a number from 1 to 100. Actually, let's just talk about 1 to 10 right now. So if I have this decimal number and I want to modify it in some way so that I can get a whole number, you know, what can I do? So let's think about this. If I have some decimal number, for example, 0.75, and I want this number to be scaled into a range of 1 to 10. If I take this number and I multiply it by 10, what is it going to give me? It's going to give me 7.5, right? If I have a number that's like 0.42, if I multiply it by 10, what do I get? Right? So I'm scaling this number. That's what I'm doing by multiplying it. If it's 0.2478 times 10, I'm going to get 2.478, right? Let's check our theory here and try that. So over here, let's take this number. Let's do math.random times 10. And let's look and see what we get. All right, so now look at what I'm getting. I'm getting 6.6, 5.3, 6.1, right? So I'm getting numbers that are going to be in the range of 0 up to 9 point something. All right. But what I want is numbers from 1 to 10. And so, first of all, how can I get, if I can just pull off the decimal part of this, then that almost gets me what I want. So how can I basically round this number down? So there's another function that we can use. There's a floor function and there's a ceiling function. So floor and ceiling give you either rounding down or rounding up. So I'm going to change this to math.floor, and we'll take the floor of this number. Okay, let's see what we're getting now. So now I got 3, 1, 4, 9, right? And if I run it a lot, I probably can see 0 at some point, but I'll never see 10. So this is going to give me numbers now from 0 to 9. I want 1 to 10. So if I add 1 to this, 1 plus math.floor, math.random, notice where the parentheses are, then this should now give me numbers that will be from 1 to 10. Maybe if we run it a few times, we might be able to see 10 actually show up. There you go. There's a 10, right? So this is actually a formula, something that you can keep in mind. If you want to get a random number, in this case from 1 to some number, then we have to multiply by 10 to scale that decimal number, round it down, and then add 1 to it. If I want to get numbers between like 10 and 20, there's a way to figure out the math to do that with the same concept here. So I'm going to let you all think about that. All right, but for right now, so if I want this to be numbers from 1 to 100, all I'm going to do is change this to 100, right? Because now this is going to scale this number to be up to 99 point something, and then add 1, we'll get 100. But for right now, I actually want to stick to 1 to 10 for our testing purposes, okay? And then we can adjust that later. Sometimes when you are working on a problem, you do want to sort of change your, especially with random number generators, you want to keep the range smaller just for your testing. All right, so we have picked a number. We only need to pick the number one time. Later on, we'll talk about restarting this game, but for right now, we only picked the number one time. We're not going to refresh the page. So then when I input a number and click check, okay, let's outline the steps here. And then in the next video, so I want you to think about coding it. In the next video, we'll code it. So what do we need to do first? I need to get the user's guess from the text box. And how about right now, in the previous video, we talked about validating and making sure that something is there. Let's not worry so much about bad data right now. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to change this text box in the next video so that we can only input numbers. I'll show you in the next video. So we'll want to get the user's guess from the text box. Then we will want to use an if statement to compare the guess to the picked number, right? We have this variable called picked number, and we will want to display message of correct or not correct. Okay, that's all we want to do just to get started. So we are going to work on the coding. You could, after you stop this video, work on coding that. And in the next video, I will go through the steps to actually do that code.